Okay, so just a quick intro as to what this video is supposed to be. This guide is intended as sort of a comprehensive analysis of all the important aspects of the fight that I could think of, just to help anybody struggling with Furious Rajang. I plan on going over the general aspects of the fight, and then doing a sort of move-by-move breakdown with slowdown footage of all of his attacks and my thoughts on like the sort of potential punishes you could go for. Then after that, I'd like to talk about items and weapon sets that I'd recommend and some environmental factors. I've already given my thoughts on the actual armor set you can make from Rajang's part, so I won't rehash that stuff here. If I miss anything important or just anything at all, please let me know with a comment and I'll add it into like the description or to a pinned comment or something. Primarily, I'm concerned with solo play, and while I will refer a lot to like greatsword attacks, so like level 2s and level 3 charges, obviously you can sub that out for moves from your preferred weapons arsenal. Gathering nice camera angles of all the attacks and then sifting through and editing all the footage took ages, and even more than that, I spent a long time speedrunning the fight. I wasn't the best at it, but I wanted to make sure I had all the information and the credentials. You know, there's no point putting out a guide on day one if I miss all the important stuff. So yeah, it took me a long time, and if you do enjoy the video, if you watch it and find it helpful, I would appreciate, you know, likes, comments and stuff, and maybe share the video around on Twitter or Reddit or whatever your preferred social media is. But anyway, I'm done shilling myself. I hope that the video helps you in some way with the fight if you're struggling, or just regardless proves valuable. And with all that said, let us begin. So just some general information to start off with. The fight shares many similarities with base Rajang. He can still pull you off of him when you try and claw onto him, so be careful with that. And he has some pretty brutal pin attacks, which I'm sure you've seen by now, so I won't waste your time showing you them all. He is immune to shock traps during rampage mode, and by the way, rampage mode just means red arms. And he's immune to pitfall traps when he's not in range at all, unless you flinch shot him into one, in which case I think it works, but I'm not certain. The hit zones don't seem to have been substantially changed at all from base Rajang. If they have, it's not really that noticeable, so ice probably still the best element for the head, and I guess for everything. And the head and arms are still what you want to be aiming for 99% of the time. The only real difference is that the tail no longer exists, pretty much, and it's just a shit zone. There are some differences between the fight and the base fight. The de-rampage mechanic is probably the most obvious example. It's been changed from tail to head, so you hit the head to de-rampage now. And as I mentioned, the tail is no longer a weak spot at all. So during rampage mode, because the arms are hard, the head is basically your only viable hit zone. Furious Rajang will still topple over whenever you break apart or do enough damage to the head, and that's a pretty major source of DPS, and he will still perform a counter move if you topple him into a wall, so you want to make sure not to do that. That said, the counter move has changed. Base Rajang's counter, where he sort of lunged at you and hits the ground, that's no longer a counter for Furious Rajang. That's just one of his normal moves, and he spams it to no end. Furious Rajang has a new move, a new counter, where he sweeps a laser across the map, and by the way, the hitbox for this is complete garbage close to him, so try and get behind him if you can. Also, obviously, Furious Rajang has some new moves, and the end lag seems to be a little bit tighter on some of the moves, like the slam, for example. I found it a lot more difficult to land my level 3 punishes on the slam than I did for base Rajang. Rajang has quite a few moves, and it can chain them together in basically endless strings for as long as it wants to, depending on its AI. Obviously, it has the standard hops around that it does that do a bit of chip, and it has the Kelby hops that do a bit more damage. And it has that annoying little slap it can do to try and combo you into something else. Those are all pretty standard stuff from base Rajang. However, I'll talk about the bigger moves now. Obviously, it's got that flurry of punches. I'm going to go over these in more detail in a second, by the way, so don't worry. But yeah, it has the flurry of punches, which can be punished situationally. I'll talk about that in a second. It's got that slam, obviously, which is a good punish. It has a nice long opening at the end of it. It's got the laser beam. Oh, by the way, the laser beam is entirely raw damage if you weren't aware. It doesn't do any thunder. And the laser beam is a really easy punish. Has a really nice long opening. The blanka ball is still here, although it covers a bit more distance now. And it's not worth punishing at all, in my opinion. It has the spin move, which is a pretty good punish still, although it doesn't use it as much as it used to. It has that weird ass move where it like punches the ground twice and then turns a bit and then punches the ground again with a big explosion. I have no clue what to call it, by the way. If he's in rampage mode, it's a good punish, but again, we'll talk about these all in a second and go into more details. Oh, obviously it has that big fuck off slam dunk where it jumps into the air and does the massive explosion. That can be punished like it could be with old Rajang. Nothing seems to have changed there, although maybe the range on that's slightly bigger. But the new moves are probably the most important ones and the ones that people are struggling with the most. Obviously, we've got that massive lunging move, which is basically just base Rajang's counter. This is the move he uses the most in my experience if you're standing at sort of mid-range. After blanka balls, where he's covered a huge amount of distance and gotten away from you, he loves to follow it up with this. He's got the thunder arc, where he jumps into the air and rather than shooting a bolt of thunder like he used to, he shoots a sort of semicircular arc, not semicircular, like a quarter of a circle. He shoots it in a circular arc around. Anyway, again, I'll talk about it in a bit, but you know which one I'm talking about. And we've got the fist in the ground laser move, name still pending, where he shoves his fist into the ground and summons a bunch of lines and does lightning attack. Again, we'll talk about these all in a second. I'm going to play slowed down footage of all of them as I talk over them, so keep an eye on that to sort of get an idea for what I'm talking about and to see the tells for yourself. And I guess I'll start with the old moves just because they're probably more familiar to people. The flurry of punches is quite a difficult one. It's not particularly easy to punish and has very little startup time. It comes out basically instantly and it's very tough to see coming. Although, if Rajang has to turn to get at you before using it, he has a small tail where he lifts his arms, but that doesn't exactly help because if you were at that angle anyway, it wasn't like you were going to be able to punish it. My best means of avoiding him so far has basically just been to assume it's coming at all times, just like you used to with instant charges, and just position accordingly. If I've just hit Rajang and he's out of end lag and he's probably about to use another move, I'll usually just sort of roll into his chest to get out of range of the punches, or roll to the side to get out of the way of them coming, just in case he uses them. The move has very little end lag. However, because it moves basically a consistent distance depending on if he does 3 or 6, it's possible to ready up a punish by like positioning in advance and timing your hit properly. This will probably need tremor res, although it will depend on your weapon, just because the final punch of the flurry inflicts tremor. The slam is basically the same as old Jang's slam, except that I've noticed slightly less end lag, so you need to time your punish a little bit better. The move has a massive tail, obviously, I don't think I need to explain that one. Either use tremor res or iframe the tremor, and then punish during the long end lag of the move. Iframing the tremor is actually really easier than I expected it, and it's similar to like base Jang, because it doesn't have very many active frames. However, the roll animation does cut into your punish, because you obviously got to wait for it to finish, and the timing is already so tight that, for example, with a greatsword, it's very difficult to get the roll in and land a level 3 consistently. So if you find yourself consistently being a few frames too late to land your good punish, you might want to throw on tremor res so you don't have to wait for the roll animation. Either way though, it is quite important to gauge whether or not you've been able to punish in time and you'll have enough time to do the full punish. For example, with greatsword, you're better off cutting your losses at a level 2 strike rather than overcommitting and then missing entirely or getting punished, if you know what I mean. The laser isn't particularly complicated, same as base Jang, it's going to either come out slowly or quickly, but either way, you just got to roll out of the way and line up for an easy punish because the move lasts ages and has a lot of end lag. He does like to combo it after the little slap, and if the little slap lands on you, there's a good chance that the laser might get you. It's kind of an RNG roll. It doesn't happen enough for me to worry about it, but if you do find it sort of killing you or damaging you a lot, you might want to try flinch free or evade extend in your set. But for me at least, it wasn't that much of a big deal. The blanka ball clears a bit more distance than base Jang's did. He has a bit of a hop at the end of it, and it combos into a wider range of moves, especially the new lunge attack that Jang has. In my opinion, it's not really worth punishing it at all, just because he's obviously hopped away from you when he's about to use it most of the time. And when he does land, he's about to go straight into another attack, so don't bother trying to punish the blanka ball. Just be ready for the coming lunge 90% of the time, and then the move that follows that might be punishable if you're lucky. Might be a laser. If you're not lucky, maybe he'll waste 2 minutes without a single opening. That's just Rajang. The spin move doesn't get used very frequently anymore, at least in my experience, but when he does decide to use it, you sort of see him cock his arm backwards and sort of turn his body alongside with it to prepare for the spin, at which point he'll obviously then spin and it sort of takes him forwards a little bit. You punish it exactly the same as you would for regular Jang. Again, there seems to be a tiny bit less end lag than there used to be, but it's basically just the same opening as the slam, so you can, get into position and use whatever punish you like. And as you get better at gauging how far the spin takes him forwards, and as you get better at sort of noticing those first few opening frames of the attack, you can start positioning well in advance, which will let you land an even better punish depending on your weapon and sort of how early you are able to time things. The weird move where he punches the ground a few times then turns and punches it again, it's a good opening with some caveats. First of all, it's very tough to see coming like it was in base Jang. By the time you've noticed it, you probably won't have enough time to dodge it if you're in range of the first 2 punches. The last punch also has a really large area of effect, so do be careful with your positioning. But when he's in rampage mode, and this is different to base Jang, he follows up the final hit with a sort of backflip style deal which turns his body 180 degrees, after which there's a reasonable amount of end lag which you can punish. It's not as much as a slam or a spin, but it's still decent enough for a level 1 or a level 2 slash depending on how quickly you get into position. Welcome to Microsoft Paint. I have an image of Rajang and Hunter here. This one especially took me way longer than I'm willing to admit. But anyway, I'm here to sort of demonstrate what I mean. Let's say Rajang's using this attack and he's punched hair, and then he punches sort of hair and he's facing this way. There's his horns, and that's the direction he's punching at. Usually what he'll do is he'll do that sort of weird backflip thing, and he'll end up with his face right around where he punched, so his face will end up here, and he'll be facing the opposite direction, so you can come in and sort of attack his face And he does one of those long sort of head shake things at the end of it, so you've got enough time to punish. I forgot to talk about the pin animation. When he tries to pin you, there's a reasonable amount of end lag at the end of it, so if you happen to be in a good position, you can punish it. But generally, you don't end up close enough to be able to pull anything off in my experience. And lastly, the massive fuck off dunk seems to have a larger range than before. I'm not 100% sure, I haven't tested it in detail, but if you just sprint away from Rajang, you'll be fine. And then after he's done the attack and after the explosion's gone off, you can actually turn inwards and get a quick punish in. Usually just enough for one unsheath attack, nothing substantial, but yeah, not really much else to say here. The lunge move is basically just base Jang's old counter when you toppled it into a wall. It can't be punished. It has a very small startup animation where Jang, he takes his fist backwards, kind of like the spin move, but he doesn't turn his body alongside it. When he uses the move, his whole body is kind of like a hurt box. Either that or it has a large AoE, I'm not sure, not really much difference. But generally, I try to dodge away from the body and roll towards the end. Either way, whenever I see his right arm go up, I run towards his right to get away from his head, essentially. You can see it on screen, it should make more sense, but I'm trying to run away from his body past his arm, if that makes sense, and then again roll towards the end. The roll is nice just for a little bit of extra distance and also possibly iframing stuff. The move, after he's used it, pretty much immediately combos into something else, so it really can't be punished effectively. Though, he does follow it with a wide range of moves, often things like the laser or the spin, which themselves can be punished, so just be ready for the next move coming, basically. The sort of thunder arc that it sprays is probably Jang's most troublesome move at first, just because it inflicts thunder blight, which gets you stunned a lot, and also seems really hard to dodge until you understand it. However, once you actually understand how the move works, it's actually really easy to get out of the way of, and it's actually a really nice opening too. It has a longish startup, where his mouth sort of grows with lightning, and then he jumps up into the air. It's pretty easy to see coming. Now, once you see that happening, all you need to do is move either towards Jang or away from him, preferably towards so you can punish afterwards. What he'll do is he'll spit a number of thunder projectiles, and they subsequently explode in a few seconds. But anyway, they're spat in a circular arc with Jang at the center, and they're aimed to try and hit the player. So long as you move perpendicularly towards or away from Jang, you'll be completely fine. Welcome back to Microsoft Paint Town. So what I will do is I'll demonstrate using my wonderful images. So let's say Jang is hair, and let's say you are hair. What Jang is going to try and do is he'll jump up into the air and he'll shoot his projectiles in a circular arc with Jang at the center. So you can imagine sort of radial lines. The thunder projectiles will be along this arc. And so all the hunter needs to do is just take his ass and, let me get my pen out, and just move inwards towards Jang or outwards to get out of the circular arc. Hopefully the footage and this combined sort of make it easy for you to understand. Now if you move towards Jang, depending on how quick you are of course, you can start readying your punish pretty much before the projectiles even hit the ground if you're quick enough. A great sword level 3 charge is basically free if you're fast enough again, but it can be quite tough to sort of recognize the move quickly enough to actually do what you need to do. So be sure not to overcommit if your gut's telling you that you don't have enough time to get your full punish in, because again, better to let go rather than get punished or miss completely. Lastly, the move where he shoves his fist into the ground and summon lines of lightning. The move has a pretty long wind up, at least by Jang standards. He grabs the ground with one arm and then uses it to push him into the air. Meanwhile, his other arm has been lifted into the air, and by the time he reaches the ground, he sort of shoves it in. Then you'll see a bunch of lines appear on the ground, which are sort of indications of where the hurt box is about to come from. So we are back with my amazing diagrams, and what we'll do is let's say Rajang is hair and the hunter is hair. So what happens is after Jang jumps up into the air and shoves his fist into the ground around hair, you'll see these yellow lines appear into the ground, and they emanate radially from Rajang to try and encompass the hunter. So it'll be something like this. You'll see these sort of lines, little crags appear in the ground. Again, you hopefully have seen the footage, and I'll show you some more in a second. But what happens is after a few seconds of delay, electric sort of propagates outwards and damages the player if they're standing over it along these lines. Now the move is fairly easy to dodge. All the hunter has to do is make sure he's standing in a reasonable place. If he's far away enough from if he's far enough from Jang, he just needs to stand between the lines because there's more than enough space because they've deviated far enough. Remember, they move out radially. If he's close to the monster, then really all you got to do is move to the side a little bit and you'll be completely outside of range, and then you can walk towards Jang. So yeah, either way, very easy to dodge. If you are on the outside, then you can quite easily just run towards Rajang while it's still got its arm in the ground and summoning lightning, and you can get more than close enough to land a punish. It's not going to be as long as something like the slam, for example. but you can normally land like a level 1 or 2. And that is the move by move analysis. Hopefully I've caught all the important ones. Let me know if I missed anything, and I'll put it in the comments, in a pinned comment, or like in the description or something. But yeah, that's how all his moves work. That's how to dodge them. That's how to punish them. All that's really left to talk about are things like set recommendations, item sets, and some environmental things. I'm going to start with the environment because they're probably the most important. At least at the time of writing or speaking or recording or whatever. When you fight Rajang in the quest that you get it with, the special assignment in the Hoarfrost Reach, he spawns in the area with the Boaboas. I think that's what they're called. And what they do is they pellet him with like sleep and paralysis and all sorts of other jazz. So if you can get out quickly enough before he moves to another area, it's actually really useful to take advantage of that. The other nice thing is whenever they do hit him with those things, when he gets up from being toppled over, or when he gets up from being trapped, or when he gets up from basically anything, he does a really long get up animation where he sort of shakes his head around. And what that means is actually with the greatsword, for example, if you get close enough to him when you've toppled him onto the ground, you can land a level 3 normal attack, followed by a level 3 strong charge slash, followed by a level 3 true charge slash, and they're all really easy to land, and the timing isn't tight at all. So yeah, the long opening you get because of the Boaboas and some other factors around the map. He does seem to do it randomly as well, I'm not sure, but at least in my experience it's mostly to do with the Boaboas. But yeah, the long get up animation he has from toppling really lets you pile on DPS while he's down. The other thing, although less important, is the falling ground. If Rajang has to climb up from the ground that falls beneath him, he always jumps to like the same location. No, sorry, not every time. But depending on where he is, he always sort of moves outwards from where he's clinging onto the ground by a few meters. The distance is very consistent, and so it's really easy the moment you see him clinging onto ground to go there in advance and to start charging up a slash. It takes a few attempts to get used to the positioning, but once you get it, it's just more free DPS. Now, it's very difficult to make any weapon set recommendations because everyone's using different weapons and different playstyles. Personally, I use Frostcraft Greatsword, but with the set modified slightly to try and get to 100 affinity, not just using crit draw, because I'm going to be doing a lot of TCS while it's on the ground. So that's my preferred playstyle. However, as far as general recommendations go, you're not going to be tenderizing the head. You're probably not going to be tenderizing at all. And in fact, that's another piece of advice I should give. Don't bother trying to claw this guy. At the end of his long animations, like for example the laser beam, you can obviously hook onto him and send him flying into a wall or whatever. But personally, I wouldn't waste time trying to tenderize his arms. That might not be ideal, like from a speedrunner perspective, maybe it's slightly more DPS to tenderize. But at least from a casual play perspective, it's just so much of a pain and it's not worth getting pinned for. So avoid clawing and build your sets so that you get to 100 affinity without relying on the extra 20% that comes from weakness exploit tenderized bonus. So use as much critical eye as you can, maybe the Safi bonus. Use 3 points of weakness exploit if you need to. But keep in mind that that'll only be worth 30% affinity. So yeah, try and get to 100 as much as you can. But I think that basically covers everything. Flinch free might be nice for the little slap if that annoys you. Evade extender might be nice for getting out of that one particular combo, although I wouldn't recommend it. And tremor resistance can be quite nice, especially for the second area, but also for punishing the slams more effectively, and depending on your weapon, you might need it for certain punishes. Oh, another thing that I should mention, I guess it's kind of like a miscellaneous tips area now. Jang drops those thorn pods which give KO damage. Now I found that with Greatsword, I'm not entirely sure how those thorn pods work, but at least with Greatsword, if you land both thorn pods on his head and then just pop them normally, you're basically guaranteed a KO. And if you're not using a KO weapon, that can be really convenient free DPS. Aside from that, if he's pinned you and you have one of those pods or any pod in hand, that'll allow you to stop him from doing the punish animation, although you can usually roll away from it depending on positioning. Do your best to avoid toppling him into a wall to counter. Remember, as I said, especially in the first area, every topple is worth a full level 3, a true charge, a strong charge level 3, and a TCS level 3. That's 400, 500, and 1200 damage, one after the other. We're talking like 2000 free damage every time he topples over, and that's obviously going to be damage that leads towards another topple as you damage the head. Anytime that you topple him into the wall, you've missed out on a free 2000 damage to the head, and you've made the next stagger a lot harder to get. So avoiding toppling him into the wall is imperative. If you think you've done enough damage to the head and you've gone a while without a stagger, just wait. Don't take advantage of every opportunity you have. Angle yourself. Jang will topple over in the direction that you're facing when you attack him. So angle yourself away from a wall if you've got an opening, and make sure that you don't stagger him into a wall as much as you can avoid it. Not only are you avoiding that stupid sweeping laser beam that'll probably kill half of your team in one attack, but you're also obviously landing so much free DPS, especially in the first area. And I think that basically covers all the miscellaneous and the item set tips as well that I had to offer. I don't think there's much else I need to talk about, aside from just sort of a general overview of how I address the fight. Yeah, okay, so I'll see you with that in a second. Aside from that, I don't really have anything else to say regarding like equipment sets and stuff. Item sets, however, there are a few things that I want to note. Obviously, bring null berries if you keep getting hit by the arc shot and you need them, but otherwise they're not particularly useful. The most important item that I would recommend you start bringing with you are pitfall traps. I know a lot of players just sort of disregard them, and they're not that great for the opening they give in and of themselves. However, they basically let you freely de-rampage Rajang. All you got to do is put a pitfall trap out, start wailing on the head, and if you're in the first area, which is where I like to use them, the moment it rampages, just put out the pitfall trap. He'll have the really long getting up animation because of the Boaboas, and it's more than enough time to de-rampage him. So if you are finding rampage mode annoying, or you just want a lot of nice long free openings, bring pitfall traps and the combines for more pitfall traps, or shock traps, I guess. But I prefer pitfalls. So just before I get to the sort of overview and final tips, I'm going to shield myself again if you don't mind. This video took ages. Currently my lungs are about to give up because I've been talking for so long. Remember that every take and every bit of audio that makes it into the video, there are like 10 failed takes. So if the video lasts 10 minutes, then you can get an idea for how long the recording process lasts. And the editing is even longer than that. So yeah, the video took me ages to put together, something like 50 or 60 hours together. And that's not including the time I spent speedrunning beforehand to make sure I was able to get you a quality summary of the fight. So if you found what's come so far useful, or you find what's about to come useful as well, I would really appreciate it if you do the YouTube stuffs, likes, comments, all that jazz. Maybe share the video around on like Reddit or Twitter or whatever your preferred social media is. And I think that's all I really wanted to talk about. Yeah, that's basically my overview of the method. Sorry if it was a bit rambly, it was unscripted. I hope you had a good time. I hope you learned something useful today. And I hope you have a good time with the fight, and I hope you manage to farm up the pieces that you want to farm up. All the weapons. Alright. Have a lovely day. Take it easy.